Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
How many times have you wished you could be in two places at once? With Wix, you practically can. Wix's website builder is packed with powerful AI tools to make running your business online easier. Build a full site just by talking with AI. Get an AI agent to manage your sales and marketing. Or work like a 10-person team, even if it's just you. So you don't need superpowers to get everything done. You just need Wix. Try it now for free at Wix.com.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. Today's episode, I've got a great scammer story for you. Now, this is a Prime Video 3-part doc series. It is called Hollywood Hustler, Glitz, Glam, Scam. Now, you know I love a great scammer story, and I truly believe one of the best places to live if you are a grifter is in Southern California, because very few people ask the necessary questions that would reveal you to be the liar that you are. People sort of just kind of believe your BS. And this is certainly one of those stories. So Zach Horwitz wasn't a Hollywood insider. He was just a kid from Indiana. Charming, ambitious, and determined to make it big. Friends from the University of Indiana remember him as the guy with big dreams and even bigger confidence. After graduation, he headed out west, chasing the same fantasy that's drawn so many hopefuls before him. He wanted to become a star. In Los Angeles, he reinvented himself as Zach Avery, the actor. He appeared in a few small films, he worked the red carpets, and built a life that looked like success. Courtside lurked seats, luxury cars, and a $5.7 million Beverly Wood mansion. But beneath the surface, it was all smoke and mirrors. Behind the glitz, he was running a massive financial con, one that would become one of Hollywood's boldest Ponzi schemes. He called his company 1 in a Million Capital, and the name sounded ambitious and visionary, exactly the kind of brand Hollywood investors love to believe in. And to give his company credibility, he claimed that he had financial backing from some major names like Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz. And he said that he'd worked during a stint at their venture capital firm, Mavron. Well, all of those claims were lies. He created fake documents complete with forged signatures and counterfeit contracts to make it look like his company was acquiring distribution rights to films and reselling them to streaming giants like HBO and Netflix. Now, the pitch was simple, but irresistible. Invest in film licensing deals and in a matter of months collect 20 to 40% returns. The first people he pitched were the ones who trusted him the most, his college friends from Indiana and Chicago. And they believed in him. And when those early payouts came in, payouts funded by money from new investors, not profits, it all looked legitimate, and word spread through their networks, pulling in friends, relatives, and acquaintances who wanted in on the success. For years, the illusion held. Zach played the part of a successful film executive, living the life investors thought they'd helped him build. He was a Hollywood success story, but at least on paper. But like every Ponzi scheme, it couldn't last forever. By 2020, the flow of new money began to dry up. The pandemic hit. Investors started asking questions, and Zach could no longer juggle the payments. The empire began to crumble, and he defaulted on over 160 payments, leaving hundreds of investors owed hundreds of millions of dollars. And the total losses? More than $650 million, one of the largest investment frauds in Hollywood history. And as investigators uncovered the truth, the emotional fallout hit even harder. His ex-wife, Mallory, who had fallen in love with him when they were teenagers back in Indiana, discovered that the life they'd built together was built on lies. Now, she opens up in the new series and reveals the heartbreak of realizing the man that she thought never really existed. And the series also includes the voices of his mistress of 5 years, who believed she was part of a secret love story, not realizing she was another piece of the illusion. And then also his friends, the ones that had become his business partners, who describe in raw and painful detail how they were drawn into his web of deception. This is a story more than greed. It's about trust, identity, and the power of belief. Zach Horwitz didn't just scam investors, he sold a fantasy. And he understood the psychology of Hollywood, how people want to believe in the next big thing, the next rising star, the next sure bet. And he gave him that story, played the role perfectly, and for nearly a decade, no one questioned the script. But when the credits finally rolled and the dream was over, the cost was staggering. So it's called Hollywood Hustler, Glitz, Glam, Scam, and it pulls back the curtain on how this all happened, offering an unflinching look at the people who loved him, trusted him, and lost almost everything because of him. I am thrilled that I have the director and executive producer, Rebecca Chaiklin, with me to discuss this wild story. Here's my interview. Rebecca, it is a pleasure to meet you. I'm so excited to talk about this most perplexing and fascinating story. So welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Now, this is a pretty juicy one, I have to say, and surprisingly was unfamiliar with. How did this story first come to you?
I was first brought a couple of articles about the story from Vice Studios, and I read them, and I was like, this is kind of interesting, but I don't really believe the wife. I really don't. Like, how could she possibly have lived with this guy? And then I met Mallory because I thought she was, I really thought if I was going to do the story, I wanted to tell it from his inner circle. And what made this more interesting to me was the fact that Zach, who is the person who perpetrated Hollywood's largest Ponzi scheme, actually enlisted his closest friends and family to help him perpetrate this, them for the most part unknowingly, that it was a Ponzi scheme.
What was the first sign that he was somebody who embellished stories, elaborated on stories, and eventually led to the first of the scam?
I think it started really young. Like when he was in college, he was super generous. He was incredibly charismatic, good looking. He was kind of the ringleader, and they were like the coolest kids at IU, Indiana University. But he would do things like he took all his friends on a cruise, and then he somehow convinced them, because he was paying for everyone, that they should just lie and say that they were the IU Division I champion football team. And they all kind of went along with it because it seemed harmless. And he was like, it'll just help us pick up chicks, And he I don't think anyone thought much of it. Zach had this incredible ability. He really knew psychologically how to connect with people in a pretty profound way. So he was the guy after a night out partying who would like stay up and look at the stars and talk about people's most intimate issues with them. And people felt super connected with him. And he then used that to manipulate all his friends, because they became most of his friends went to the business school, and it's a pretty prominent business school. And they went on to have successful careers. They went on to have successful careers in finance and banking. And when he started this the fraudulent business Ponzi scheme, he enlisted them to help him raise money. And so he had this group of good-looking guys who had prominent positions in the finance world, who were super aspirational, who became his calling card. And they had financial networks that they could tap into, and financial networks that were in the Midwest, and people who knew nothing about Hollywood. So it kind of made sense. They had this friend who'd moved to LA. He'd found this loophole, and they were cashing in big time. And so they started raising him money. And then he was really meticulous, and he would pay people back on the date, and he would actually physically wire the money back into their bank accounts, which is very unusual for a Ponzi scheme. Usually you just get a bank statement saying you're this much richer. But with him, he actually wired people back their the principal and the interest, which was absurd. It was anywhere from 20 to 80% within 6 to 8 months. And then they would immediately turn around because everyone was making so much money and reinvest and bring in new investors.
What do you think was his Achilles heel in terms of his identity? And how does that weave into his parents' divorce and his mother remarrying someone who had money?
I think his mother marrying somebody who had money, I think he really loved. His parents had a pretty ugly divorce. And so he was somewhat estranged from his biological father, and then developed a pretty close relationship with his stepfather. And I wouldn't say he was completely estranged, but they didn't have a super close relationship. I think it was too troubling because his mom was so upset with with his biological father. So then his stepfather had made a lot of money. He was self-made. He'd made a lot of money. And Zach realized that was a calling, like it was a calling card. He was in high school. He had fancier cars and houses than his friends did. And it gave him cachet. And so I think it like a bell went off. But I think psychologically, he had a deep desire to be loved.
Mm-hmm. The first business that he builds, he tells everybody that he's business partners with Howard Schultz. How is he able to pull that one off?
I mean, it's so crazy. I think, in retrospect, it's really hard for everyone who was involved with that. But he was, sort of stayed on top of the news. He decided after lying and saying that he was going to graduate school, which he never did in Chicago. Like we looked at the rosters. He was never enrolled at the University of Chicago. In fact, the major he said he had, what didn't even exist at the school.
Wow.
So,
oh my Lord.
But he was very smart in some ways. And then there were some gaping holes in his story. Starbucks had blown up and become this mega corporation. And Zach was ahead enough in terms of the news. Howard Schultz had decided he wanted to branch out and go into like juices, which were becoming, everyone was starting to juice, and that was becoming a new health craze. And so I think he saw it as the new frontier of drinks. And so Zach said that he had met him at some venture capitalist like fundraising event. And then they went out to dinner, and then it came out in the news that Howard was looking to invest. And he actually did invest in some juice companies. And so there were enough little signposts that made it all seem, and Zach, enlisted his closest friends to come run this with him. Some left like jobs at prominent banks to come work at the juice bar, smoothie bar. And he sent them all emails from Howard Schultz, and he made up a email account for Howard Schultz and sent them all. And he would study the way Howard Schultz spoke and watch his interviews and use his language. And somehow, like every time they were supposed to meet him, it didn't quite happen. Howard was so busy. He's a multi-billionaire, like couldn't quite make it to the meeting, but they were receiving emails, and it seemed as though he was going to invest in their juice bar, smoothie bar.
Your business is one of a kind, so your website should be too. With Wix, it's easy. Almost too easy to create a website that's perfectly yours. Just tell AI what kind of site you want to build, or choose from thousands of templates. Change whatever you want, whenever you want, and get everything you need to start running your business your way. No matter what you sell or what you aspire to be, you can do it all yourself on Wix.
Who were the actual investors in that first fuel business?
It's a very good question. I believe Zach's stepfather sadly passed away several years after his mother married him. And Zach inherited some money.
Mm-hmm.
She inherited like a fairly large estate. And I think that's where the money came from. But I also think I had some like off the record, but background conversations. I think he also had already begun forging bank statements. So he was able to say like, oh, I got this inheritance, but he added like 1 or 2 zeros and then was able to take out loans against an investment account that he couldn't touch.
Well, that makes sense too, because it's like the store opens and then soon after it closes down with no explanation why.
Exactly.
Then he gets to Hollywood and he somehow inserts himself into places where it could be perceived that he's around people with power. So someone from Indiana who's frankly a lousy actor somehow is able to amass these connections and to make his friends who have degrees in finance and some tangential relationships with people in finance to believe that he has some access to power and to people that can catapult them into a higher level of success. How is he able to do that?
I think it goes back to these. It was really interesting for me as I really wanted to tell this story because from his inner circle, like the people who are closest, not these sort of talking heads of people who are analyzing it, but the people who really went through it with him, because it was the pathology of it that was really interesting to me. So I think it goes back to those very intense, close relationships that they were like jockey guys. They hung out in the gym. They were all athletes. I don't think a lot of guys like that have a lot of relationships like they did with Zach in terms of like talking about like if they had lost a parent or a bad divorce.
He's almost weaponizing the very personal information that they were willing to share with him.
Exactly. And this like intense connection that they all felt like they had with him. When I sort of was talking to them, every one of them was like, well, Zach was my best friend. We were best friends. And I would be like, wow, it's so interesting that like 9 of you all feel like Zach was your very best friend and you had some incredible relationship that nobody else had with him. So I think that's how he was able to enlist them, that they really felt connected to him. They felt like they had this bond with him and they were very taken with him. Zach was smart enough to be slightly more sophisticated than most of the people in Indiana. He was able to show these guys a lifestyle and world that they had never had exposure to. And that has a lot of cachet with people.
It's almost like the dollar store version of Entourage. Like he's convinced them like we're a wolf pack and we're going to have this like level of success, like Adrienne Grenier's character on an HBO series. The fact that the mistress participates, how did you get that to happen?
She was a little hesitant at first, but eventually, I was like, listen, you're going to be in it one way or another. So you may as well humanize yourself because you're actually a really interesting, complicated character. And bizarrely, even though people might dismiss her because she works in strip clubs and has been around that industry, she's a successful businesswoman. Like she's the one out of all.
It seems like it.
The real entrepreneur. So it sort of turned the whole story on its head that way. She was actually doing the work.
Well, it also seems like, she keeps saying, I'm the only person that he says he can trust. I think he thinks she's the only person of his kind.
She's very, very clever. And I also think that Zach kept up these appearances of being a family man and being a good dad and a husband. And because he came from a quite conservative place. In the country.
Absolutely.
And he also was living this incredibly double, triple, quadruple life that was incredibly decadent and dark and was consuming copious amounts of drugs and had a sex addiction, and he could just be honest with her, whereas with everyone else, he was having to keep up all these different facades of like his acting role as a super successful entrepreneur on this meteoric rise to become a billionaire. And with her, he just was able to sort of let go, I think. And so they ended up having this real connection. And she, in many ways, also played this role of this titillating, sexual fantasy for all these men who cycle through Las Vegas, and that's what they want. So they both had these public lives that were not, and then they would find each other and they had a real connection.
I also wondered with the drugs, when you're providing that a group of people with drugs, is he using that for blackmail too? Or is there a fear that's going to be used against, like, you're not going to be disloyal to me because I know what you do in Vegas, and you don't want me to tell people what you really do when we leave LA.
Yeah, I think there was absolutely a very strong element of that. And, most of these guys are married and they were all starting young families, and that wasn't really their culture. It was like where they went wild and crazy with him. And I don't know the degree to who did what at what point, but it was very decadent.
Mallory, when you look at all of the stuff that's going on, I had to wonder if when she watches this, is it going to be even more painful?
It's painful, but I also think that it's been cathartic for her, because for so long she'd felt on some subconscious level as though something wasn't quite right, but she was really scared of losing him because she was so in love with him, and he was narcissistic and manipulative with her. And so she was always trying to keep it together, like their perfect life. And I think the fact that she's finally been able to be honest about the fact that she really wasn't happy, and for a lot of it, even though she really loved him and she was really into the life that they lived a very fancy life in LA for a while. I think it's been cathartic for her to just be able to be honest. This is painful, but also cathartic and helpful in some ways. I've seen her over the course of filming this evolve so much. And I'm just like, you go, girl, because she's really gone from being so down and depressed to becoming a strong, bright, successful, most importantly, amazing mom who's able to take care of her kids on her own. And she's doing it on her own. And it's not been an easy journey to get there.
Well, it just seems like, too, to see the story play back, he really abandoned her. It doesn't seem like he was with her at all.
He was terrible to her. I mean, I hesitate because I think there's always two people in a relationship. So they both have to be willing to allow that. But he was really lousy to her. And she was a young mom with 2 little kids and very little help, and a husband who was really absentee and disappearing all the time to go off and live his other lives under the guise of being this crazy successful entrepreneur who had to travel around the world all the time. Yeah. So it was really tough for her. I mean, and she was left with nothing, no house, no car. They took everything, all their possessions. She had $100 in a bank account, 2 kids, no job. And she hadn't worked in a couple years, even though she had started to have her own career that was going really well prior to that. He really wanted her to stop. And I think that was another level of control, that she was completely dependent upon him. And so she moved back into her parents' basement in Santa Claus, Indiana, and literally started rebuilding from square one after her parents were bankrupted in a custody case with his family over the kids while he was pleading guilty and copping a plea deal.
Was it difficult at times to unravel all the details of the scheme? Because you have all of these players, you have all of the group of friends, you have, the people that were involved with the business, you have the wife, you have the ex-wife, you have his stepfather's son and his partner. How were you able to balance in 3 episodes telling the entire story and involving everyone? And included in that, were there any parts that you weren't able to include for the sake of time that you wish you could have?
Oh, for sure. There were things that we couldn't include. But this started as a feature film, and our amazing executive at Amazon, she was smart enough to know, no, we need to pace this out. There's a lot going on here, and we've got a lot of access to a lot of different stories. I think, so I was really interested in just the pathology of somebody who did this to his friend group and getting to know them and who they were and who knew what, when, and where, but also very cognizant at the same time that there were hundreds of victims in this Ponzi scheme. And a lot of people lost their entire life savings. A lot of people were heading into retirement or in retirement and got carried away thinking, they were going to have so much more money to live off of, and ended up losing everything. And so it was really important that we do really solid journalistic investigative work in terms of how this happened and how it went on for 8 years and who else was culpable or involved. And we did a lot. And there were huge financial institutions that did business with him, knowing full well that, over $1 billion came into this bank account and no money ever came in from Sony or Netflix or HBO. There were large prominent law firms that worked with him, knowing full well that they were never negotiating with Sony or Netflix or HBO. So he had the infrastructure of success very well built around him, which made it so much more believable for so many people. But there were a lot of, I would say, institutions culpable in this carrying on for so long.
I also wondered about the partners of the business.
The JJMT guys?
Yeah. Now, has it affected their ability to get work after it?
No. They all have successful careers in finance.
This is so bizarre.
It's so bizarre. Let me back up a second. So those were, at least Jake, who was the ringleader of JJMT, was a very, very close friend of Zach's and had that kind of bond with him that we discussed before. And they also had the resume. They went, they had all worked in finance. They had a network of investors who were looking for business opportunities. So they sort of had everything that Zach needed. And they were really buttoned up, outwardly facing. And so it was like the perfect storm. And I see both sides of it. Zach was, and it makes you wonder whether he could have done this alone, but he was unbelievable in terms of the amount of paperwork and agreements and documents he provided. And he was meticulous. They would get paid on the day. I think they told me it was over. I spoke to them a lot. They were super helpful in terms of background information. Okay. They could not participate in the documentary because they have so many family members, who, including their own families, who had lost so much money. They didn't want to be perceived as somehow glorifying this event, which was a train wreck in all of their lives. Do I think there was negligence in terms of doing due diligence? For sure. You went to business school, you're in the finance world. I don't care if you don't know anything about the film business, and they, 80% returns or even 40% returns, even 20, 30% returns within 6 to 12 months, it's a huge red flag. And if they claim that they hired these firms that vetted, and the business was vetted with flying colors, but and they did that because they didn't know much about the film business. It just doesn't make sense. Like anybody who has any institutional knowledge of how the film business works knows that it doesn't work that way. You can't even get a distribution deal with Netflix or with Amazon or with HBO or Sony where you get paid out like that.
Well, also just like them reading back emails that were purportedly from someone like Howard Schultz or someone in an executive position seems so poorly written. It's surprising that not one person went, huh? But I guess if you've been doing drugs in front of someone, they might have something on you. Almost like they've got a stranglehold on, he's got a stranglehold on them.
Because they were also personally so deeply invested at that point and had brought in their entire financial networks.
True.
And so
True.
Not only was there like the decadent lifestyle that was in direct contradiction to life in the Bible Belt, but there was also, the fact that they were deeply invested. And nobody wants to suddenly be like, oh, like, this is maybe there's something really off here. So they just sort of kept going and kept feeding the beast.
So I saw at the end that his sentence has already been reduced 4 years. So how much time has he served thus far, and how much will he have to serve moving forward?
He has been in for 3.5 years now. And it was a federal case. So I think he has to serve, other than getting reductions for legal purposes. He had a very, very solid legal team representing him, like incredible lawyers. So I think they have been working to reduce the sentence, but it's not like on good time he can get. I think he will have to do 85% of time, and we'll see how much they're able to chisel it down over time.
And my last question is, has anybody had communication with him since he's gone to prison? Because it seems as if Bex is saying that they're in communication and that he has every intent to redo a career, a successful career in his own way.
Yes. There are people who are in touch with him. We reached out to him. I reached out to him personally a number of times. The production reached out to him. He did not want to participate in the documentary. Unfortunately, I would have really loved to have heard from him. And I actually think it would have served to humanize him, because I think he is incredibly charming and so smart and capable. Like, if he had put all the energy that he put in.
Isn't that the dumbest part about it? The amount of effort that you put into doctoring documents, you could have really built something substantial with your life.
Exactly. And been there for your boys, who he loves his boys so much, and they do talk. They don't see him yet, but they talk to him. And that's heartbreaking. Like, he's going to miss their entire childhood.
Yeah.
It was crazy that he, how much energy he put into the fake business as opposed to just building something real.
Building something. But he's not going to participate in yours because he doesn't have control. He would want to be the executive producer, and he still wants to control everything, even though he's behind a federal prison wall, which is
I'm sure
tracks.
He's writing the script of his own life.
Yes.
And, he has that, or at least had, maybe this time will change things. I believe everyone has the ability to change, but had that insatiable hunger to be in the spotlight, to be famous, to be loved and recognized. And I think he actually really wanted to be an artist as well. I just don't think you can't be an artist if you don't have any connection to the truth. And that went really awry.
Well, I have to tell you, by the third episode in the beginning, there is a cliffhanger that goes from episode 2 into 3. And people, I think, will be debating the identity of one of the executives, in air quotes, that some of the team members spoke with. And I'm excited to hear a conversation about that. What a cliffhanger. What a story. This must have been so much fun to make. And I really am grateful that you brought this to us because, I think it's a conversation starter.
Great. Well, I'm grateful that you had me on your show.
The amazing Kate Casey.
I want to thank Rebecca for being a fantastic guest and remind you to make sure that you click subscribe to this podcast. Please leave a 5-star review. Join the Facebook group, Reality Life with Kate Casey. You can get bonus episodes. Don't miss the one I just posted by going to Apple Podcast and Patreon, patreon.com/Kate Casey. You can also get my What to Watch list of what to watch in unscripted TV every week by going to katecasey.substack.com. And make sure you follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at KateCaseyCA, TikTok, it's Kate Casey, and Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky at Kate Casey. Check back tomorrow for an all-new episode. My guest is Marisol Patton from Real Housewives of Miami.
No one knows your business better than you. So who better to create your website than, well, you? Wix's website builder puts it all in your hands. Create a beautiful website just by talking with AI or choosing from thousands of templates. Customize every detail with simple drag and drop tools and get everything you need to start running business your way. Build more, think bigger, and do it all yourself on Wix.